Thank you.
You can't ask questions.
Mariam,
You are organizer.
and thanks, Dr. Ihsan. I'm Ihsan from IRF, and it's interesting to note that from your presentation, you show that Indonesia in some way is experiencing some problems with democracy itself. While in previous discussion, mainly with Prof. Shad Faruqi, in Malaysia the situation is we are having more like problems with so-called Islamic authoritarianism, something more like, I think you can have that understanding. So there's a situation which there is some kind of differences, while knowing that Malaysia and Indonesia we share a lot of similarities and common cultures and history. So do you think that there are some ways that Indonesia could in some way learn from a bit of more religious or Islamic regulation to make things a bit under control, while Malaysia, we should learn from Indonesia on how we can adopt more democratic ways, so that could it be a balance between Malaysia and Indonesia is actually like the way forward for both countries? Maybe you can comment on that.
Thank you, Dr. Ihsan. I think the most important part of your presentation to me personally is this whole take on hate speech. And I would like also to link it back to Prof. Shad's earlier discussion on hate speech, where I think it's not a problem that is unique to both Indonesia and Malaysia. In fact, Singapore is also struggling with this whole configuration of how we find a balance between freedom of speech and hate speech. And in fact, this is a global issue at the moment that even Western societies, liberal democracies are also confronted with. You see, when it comes to hate speech, when we define it in its most basic aspect, when it comes to incitement to violence, everyone can agree that there is something to be outlawed. In fact, even, and Prof. Shad, you were right in the sense that even liberal democracies have some kind of limit when it comes to incitement of violence, and not all kind of speeches are allowed. But here come several issues, and firstly, hate speech, how we view it. Yeah? Firstly, it can be viewed from the perspective of we should outlaw it when it comes to targeting of the disempowered, vulnerable minorities, because it do have real impacts on these vulnerable, disempowered communities. In the West, for example, hate speech against the Muslims, because the Muslims are really in a disempowered state, and therefore with the expansion of Islamophobia, then it is something that Western societies are discussing about. But in our context, it will be something else, because in our context, when we latch onto the same issue, it seems to be shielding the powerful from criticisms, where those who are powerful make use of hate speech laws to shield themselves from criticisms, and that becomes a problem. Because it also means maintaining of status quo and imposing the majoritarianism while curtailing the very rights of the minorities who are actually disempowered. So it has been flipped. Hate speech laws become the very tool of the powerful to clamp down further on minorities. So that is issue number one. Issue number two is what Dr. Ihsan, you discussed briefly of what Sharon George has rightfully pointed out on hate speech, which is a phenomenon that I think we need to pay attention to. This is where hate speech can be about the focus on giving offense, at the same time also on taking offense. But what is happening is the second part is becoming more and more prevalent, has a political tool, as you rightly pointed out. And this has been utilized by extremists when firstly they claim that I am offended. So this has become a very powerful way of then mobilizing the masses, and to use this notion of I am offended to now give offense against their opponents, and playing the victim card. And we've seen in the case of Ahok, maybe also in several other cases in Malaysia. We are seeing a rise also in some cases in Singapore. And therefore using this notion of I am offended to then put pressure on the authorities, especially the police, to then rain down upon the so-called offending party or those who actually disagree with them, and therefore constricting the space for freedom of speech even further. So while as much as we applaud and we call for the need for strong hate speech laws, what we are observing now in real terms is the very use of these laws to actually curtail on the rights of the vulnerable minorities and also to entrench the status quo and at the same time restricting the space, further space for freedom of speech. I wonder what are your comments and thoughts and how we can move forward on this. Thank you.
Let me start by the answering the last one, the one that I remember most, hate spin. That's exactly what I meant and what Shad and George meant, I think, with the book. You explained that very correctly and succinctly, and yeah, that's what's going on. I was telling you precisely about what that's the case of hate spin in Jakarta against Ahok. So I have no more comment on that, but it will be, why don't we start doing something, we will be translating the book into Bahasa Indonesia. I was in Jakarta in Yogyakarta last week, again launching the book and speaking about this. And sadly, we have that, as I said before, blasphemy law that could be precisely used by manipulating the hate spins, because we also have that the blasphemy law. So manufacturing the hatred first, and then taking the victim into the court by using that very clause, which is the blasphemy law. I don't know. I think we'll be doing something. Why don't we do something together? I think I'll be inviting you, maybe Ihsan and others, to some workshop in Jakarta doing precisely. There are actually some suggestions in the book. First of all, for the state to do something more meaningful. He has that term inclusive. I don't remember the term, but it is the state who has resources to do this campaign against the hate speech. But again, we know that the state could be the solution to the hate spin, but there are also some part of the state apparatus actually part of those people who are doing precisely hate spin. So I don't know whether, I think there was a coalition, very large, expansive coalition within the Jokowi administration or others who openly or not actually supporting the protests of the defending Islam in the last months in Jakarta. So democracy and state is one of the solutions, but it could also be part of the problems, because we have to deal. This democratic channel, protest is okay within democracy. Another solution that he mentioned was for the people who are working in journalism, for example, to produce more investigative journalism, for example. So, say a kind of, he says something while others say something else. Reporting is not enough. Cover both sides is not the solutions, because what you need to know is what is the truth behind the controversy between one person and others. It doesn't mean that one is saying the truth if he is saying the truth. So the saying per se is not telling you the fact, right? So you have to investigate the issue more and find out the fact. If someone is doing crime, if someone is lying to you, for example, you have to say that he is a liar. So it's not enough for you to only cover both sides, that someone is saying this while the other is saying otherwise. So you have to go to more investigative reporting. He also mentioned something which is quite familiar now in countering violent extremism strategies, for example, which is peace journalism. So many others activities that he proposed in the last part of the book, but also the what can you do individually to do something against the hate spins. So, for example, if you are someone who is doing, who is active using Twitter, for example, you should check actually what is really hoax and what are not hoax, so you don't spread hoax, for example. That's actually tiny thing that you could do on individual basis. So I really encourage Imran and Ihsan whether we talk over lunch about how are we going to deal with this in a way that is more regional wise. I was envy sometimes with our terrorist, terrorist groups. They are more cooperating with each other than us, reformers or, liberals across South Asian countries. There's not so many cooperation between them, and they are better than, the performance better than ours. On your first questions, better way to do this is going to the first and Ihsan, what Indonesia can learn from Malaysia, what can Malaysia learn from Indonesia. I really would like to learn more from Malaysia, but look, when Professor Shad this morning said something, I think he discussed also a clause in Malaysian constitution or in Malaysian constitution that said that there are limits on religious freedom. One of the limits that one freedom of expression cannot disturb peace and harmony. Okay, I think is that correct one? Yeah. Is that within the constitution or what? Yeah. Okay. So the question is, who defines peace and who defines harmony? That's also our issue. If someone is doing precisely the opposite of that, there was no. Actually, what we are having is peace actually, but someone making noise out of peaceful Islamic tolerance by using hate spin strategy, for example. So the protests are manufactured for political reasons. And someone subjectively said that this is disturb to harmony or to peace. Whose peace is that? Whose harmony? Sometimes, or most of the time, even it is those minority groups who are usually small, who cannot say anything, who has no voice in, saying this is disturbance against my peace and my harmony. So the Cherry and Joy also used that phrase, violent entrepreneurs. So Indonesia, vigilante group, violent entrepreneurs could make use of that strategy of hate pin to make some noise, in the midst of the peaceful, actually, Jakarta. So that's one issue. I don't know. I really would like to learn more from Malaysians, how Malaysia's governor on this. But we share that issue of the situation where disturbance against harmony and peace is limiting your religious or freedom. The issue is who defines harmony and who defines peace. We have that issue in Indonesia. So if we share that, we share the bad experience, I think. The other one, you also have blasphemy law. We also have that blasphemy law. What else? Yesterday, I don't think it's a good idea to bring that point out. What I meant is, you have the number of Chinese to say this frankly, the number of Chinese in Malaysia is very much. The number are higher than they are in Indonesia, which is better actually, as a balance, because you could. Professor Chandra actually last night said that there is a kind of threat by the Chinese if you are starting to do bad things economically and politically, they could say something which is quite powerful. It was not the case in Indonesia. The Chinese in Indonesia, the ethnic Chinese, are only 4%, even less than that. So they don't have the power that those Chinese have in this very country. So that's actually another interesting comparison to make between Indonesia and Chinese. Another thing that could be made is the fact that there are minority groups in Indonesia, like Christians, whose number is very small actually, but they are luckily concentrated in one certain areas in eastern part of Indonesia, for example. So because of their being centralized in one place in Indonesia, they could say something quite strongly as there are Chinese in here. Think about if you are Christians in Indonesia, which is the number is small, and they are separated, disaggregated into some part of Indonesia, which make it less powerful as a voice of the minorities. So it's also fortunate for us that for the freedom of religious sake that they are concentrated in some part of eastern part of Indonesia. Because of their being concentrated in those part of Indonesia, they could say something, signal, which is important for the central government to think about them. So I didn't mean to say that there is nothing from Malaysia that Indonesia should learn, but we are not happy enough with the blasphemy law in Indonesia, and we are not happy at all with that clause in our regulations that say that there is a limit on freedom of religion, and one of the limit is disturbance against peace and harmony, because it could be used in a way that is very subjective and against minority groups. Hate speech. Actually, based on our book, Policing Religious. I work with the police, with the police, with Pak Tito, actually, the head of the National Police Force now in Indonesia. Before he was the police force, he was because of our research. He's a researcher, actually. He went to Singapore for his PhD dissertations, and we are researchers. We have been talking about this a lot, and because our thesis that hate speech, there are so many cases of violence against minorities started with mobilizations, and you can't do mobilization otherwise unless you use that kind of speech that was made by Sobri Lubis. It's very important for the police to have some regulation on hate speech. So I invited some legal scholars and also activists from Legal Aid Foundation in Jakarta to have, what is if we have any regulation on hate speech. And they came up with, first of all, it's not too important to hate speech, but what is the important one is hate crime. So when it comes to crimes, and we see that Sobri Lubis kind of speech is already a crime because it's all very open suggestions, not only order. If you think that he is also given his position as the Secretary General of the Front Pembela Islam, it was already a hate crime. It's no longer a hate crime, but no longer a hate speech. It's already a hate crime. So you can do that. But when we come up with the conceptualization of hate speech and hate crime, they make use that proposals to again expanding their interest, the police. So, for example, they start talking about ujaran kebencian, and also includes also the criticism against the president, for example, which is not meant by us. Okay, but that's how if you are working with the police. So our proposal ended up as a circular, surat edaran circular made internally for the police, and because of them, when they are doing policing against this kind of religious protest, they are heavily influenced by the public opinion, especially religious public opinion. If they think that there is against the interests of NU or Muhammadiyah, they wouldn't do anything useful against this kind of hate speech or hate speech. If you look at the cases like the killings of the Shia in Madura, for example, it's quite clear that they understand the cases, they follow the cases quite closely, because we studied the reports made by the police. They knew exactly the cases, but they didn't do anything that is harmful for the NU ulama in Madura. Because it was dangerous for you to do anything against the NU in Madura, for example, a special case, special island in Eastern Java, which is dominated heavily by the ulama there. So ulama actually was the government in Madura, so you can't do anything against them. So it depends. So they are act not on the principles, but also on the their judgment about the opinion, public opinion. I really like the way that former President Obama treat hate speech and hate crime in the United States of America. I remember well I think there was a pastor from Florida who would like to burn the Quran or part of the Quran, and he said that he said on national televisions, I can't say anything that could ban that intentions to speak. It's part of a hate speech. And he didn't mention the name of that pastor. He ridiculed the pastor on televisions, but he said that if that act finally done by that pastor, there will be risk, very high risk, that could happen to our citizens around the world in Indonesia. They could be killed because of that very act of blasphemy against Islam, against the Quran. I think he made a strong signal that he would like to honor, respect freedom of religion, but at the same time, he made a very strong signal about the implications of that kind of act against the Quran. So I think that's a good case. We could balance between hate speech and at the same time hate crime. But the speech made by Sobri Lubis, and you can check it on YouTube, it's hate crime already. To ask people to bunuh Ahmadiyah halal darahnya, is not only halal but halal. Yeah, it's already a hate crime for me. I think that's my answer. We certainly need to talk, Ihsan and Imran. Let's do something together regionally.
Bapak, I think we used to kind of think very high of Indonesia in terms of religious pluralism and your Pancasila especially, and it never occurred to my mind that such violent act of killing the Shiites or burning their villages or persecuting the killing them as well, and is something unimaginable. So what I want to know is that, based on your analysis, what do you think that had happened that had created this kind of very radical ideas and violent acts of Muslims against the minorities?
Thanks for the important and difficult questions. I know maybe we should talk more about the money that channeled to Southeast Asia from Saudi Arabia. That's one thing. But we don't have the data on that. We know it's hard to have that kind of data. But there's a good book published just 2 months ago called Sectarianizations. So it's more Nadir Hashemi. Nadir Hashemi. It's an edited volume, but the introduction is very powerful, seems to me. So we are not talking about sect here because we already have that sect for all the time. We also know that there are sectarianism within Muslim communities. There are, we know the Shia, the communist, and the likes. But what is going on now is sectarianizations, the mobilizations of the fact that there are sects within Islam for political reasons again. Okay, in the Middle East, usually it was the sectarianization was made by the state, who are usually authoritarian. Someone like Assad in Syria, for example. But I think it is not really the case in Indonesia. It is democratic. What is going on in Indonesia, I think, is again hate spin using sectarian fact for political reasons. I think there is the group called ANNAS, which is a very new phenomenon. ANNAS is Aliansi Nasional Anti Shia, National Alliance of Anti Shia. We never heard, that kind of stuff in the very long history of Indonesia and Shiism in Indonesia. So this new thing, and it was new development, only funded by the conflict that was going on in Syria and other part of Middle East. Again, as in the case of the religious freedom, actually we have very strong culture of tolerance. We have also a strong culture of cooperation between Shiism, Sunni activists and Sunni activists in Indonesia. We have been cooperating together all the time with people like Haidar Bagir. You'll be meeting him more later. Pak Jalaluddin Rahmat was part of the someone who we are actually enriched by the books, articles published and translated from the Shi'i thinkers like Toba Tobai, like Ali Shadiati, that kind of stuff. We have been doing that all together in the last like 50 years. Yeah. Maybe the tension started in early 80s, where there was a revolution in late 70s in Iran, and there was a mobilization for support for Iran or Saudi Arabia, because as the response to what was going on in Iran, there was against the promotions for the Sunni Islam made by the Saudi government. But again, sectarianism is not sectarianizations, and I think what is dangerous is that sectarianizations, the making of that fact of sect or sectarianism as a political weapon for some people to use for political reasons. I think that's my response, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ihsan, for the engaging, informative, and giving knowledge presentation today. So we will conclude this session, and after this we can all go for our lunch at the veranda where we had our breakfast this morning. And I would like to remind all of you to be here at the Songket for the next session on Buddhist Furry Religion and Violence in Southern Thailand by Dr. Tim Rackett, exactly or before 2 p.m. Okay? And please have a heavy dose of lunch because we have 2 sessions this afternoon, so we don't want anyone to feel very hungry and angry. Okay? That's all from me. Thank you.